Now, when I talk about urban inspirational metaphysics, what I'm really talking about is we can break down those words urban. We know that euphemistically we use that word often to refer to black folk. There's urban music, there's urban wear, urban garments, urban gear, urban this, urban that. And usually you are talking about black folks of a certain age and attitude, those who were maybe raised in the hip hop generation who have that as a common base of reference. And so we also tap into that same sort of mindset with urban in terms of things that are relevant to young black and brown and people of color today, how we relate to these things. We talked about what was happening in the 18th and hundreds and the 19th century. We know that a big part of that was our emancipation, release from the legal bonds of slavery, but we know that we went through many periods and are still going through some things where we are dealing with the effects of that. We still have to have some real conversations about that, reparations and all those things. How do you compensate for those things that have happened? And so although they were very free-thinking people, I'm sure the system of racism also permeated everything, and it had to have effects in terms of how they dealt with, process, and understood the world as well. So what we like to do now is bring contemporary examples to these ancient and ageless truths to break it down in a way that people today can get some understanding from it and some application for their lives as they experience them here in this modern urban context of where we are. Inspirational, the second word in the phrase, is that we want to inspire people to their highest height. The ageless ancients inscribed on the temples, know thyself. And that self-knowledge is what we want to inspire people to go on a journey to learn about themselves, to seek that knowledge of themselves, to seek that understanding, so that once they know who they are and know that they are divine and having that human experience, we can recognize that divinity in others. And that's when we can treat others according to that golden rule as we would like to be treated, as we expect to be treated. Love thy neighbor as thyself. And I think that's really also a statement of truth. It's a commandment, but it's a statement. We can only love others as we love ourselves. And that's why we see so many people with self-hatred and those things where they have low self-esteem and low self-image, and they project that out onto others, and that's why they're able to do harm to others. That's why they're able to see others as threats and so forth, because they haven't developed a sense of self to understand themselves, to love themselves, and to be able to apply that to love thy neighbor as thyself, as yourself. And so that's what we try to instill, that inspiring people, to touch people, to provoke thought. And hopefully when we provoke that thought and inspire them, we can transform lives. That's the metaphysical part of this. That's the alchemy that we want to see happen. Metaphysics, literally in the Greek, means going beyond the physics. Meta, beyond. Physics, the physical nature of the world, the physical structure. We can take it as we relate to Scripture as going beyond the literal. Not just looking at the letter, but the intent behind it and what was meant, because Jesus and the ancients, the Cometics, the Mayans, they all also had esoteric knowledge. And so that's how they spoke as well. That's how they taught parables and so forth that had different levels of meaning and understanding. You can get it on one level, but there were always deeper levels. When Jesus said, in my Father's house are many mansions, talking about many rooms of consciousness, many elevations. There are levels to this thing, we might say. And in fact, there are levels to it. There are levels to the stories. There are levels to the teachings. And when we gain those understandings, it elevates us. So we go beyond the physical. So we're urban. we're inspirational, and we're metaphysical. And when we take that approach, that philosophical approach to looking at the scriptures, it opens up whole new worlds of meaning and whole new worlds of relevance and whole new worlds of application, and how we can take these things when we look at the scriptures and see that every person and place that's named within those scriptures reveals some sort of aspect of ourselves. And that's what it's really about. When you know about the Hebrew language, Aramaic and so forth, and Hebrew, and many of the ancient languages, the alphabet itself was constructed in a way that there were numerical meanings to it. There were different symbologies and numerical meanings to the thing. So the words were willy-nilly and thrown together, but even those basic words had a meaning itself, different levels of meaning. And that's what we're opening ourselves to in this study and this channel, as we talk about those various levels of meaning and how they apply to ourselves and how we make them contemporary. We're taking it from a hip-hop perspective. Hip-hop meaning, or you can interpret it as higher infinite power healing our people. But so often hip-hop has been used to harm our people. And we want to take it back to some of that original intent and create our own mythologies about and instructions and legends and so forth about how we can control our own destiny. Instead of just his story, we're taking our story and making it my story so that we can talk about what it is that influences and affects us and brings about a change as we recognize our divinity and how we can, in fact, tap into our higher consciousness, our higher infinite power, and use that to heal our people as opposed to harming them. You remember there was one period of time in hip hop when there was a great emphasis on consciousness. We had those from, the native tongues and so forth, Public Enemy, KRS-One, and many other who put consciousness with intention into their lyrics. And then it was sort of co-opted by those who saw more commercial success possible by infusing a little bit more gangsterism into it. And there was not anything necessarily wrong, because even some of those original groups, even though they espoused it in ways that they were labeled as gangster rappers, what they were talking about were conditions that were real in their communities. But when things got out of balance and out of harmony, when so much emphasis was placed on the negative as opposed to making room and keeping room for the positive so that that yin and yang could stay together, that's when we begin to see the downfall and the detriment, when we have these cultures that are so consumed with strip clubs and illegal drugs and everything else, to the diminishment, to the abasement of us. We're going back to the animalistic as opposed to ascending to those files of the air, the higher consciousness that we were given dominion over. We were given dominion over the animalistic, those baser chakras, but we also know that we are in the process of elevation as we let that Kundalini energy rise up to our crown consciousness, into our heart, and then into our crown. That allows us to have self-actualization. When we can truly know ourselves and to express ourselves in the highest forms, instead of just being consistently in that lower form, the lower vibration. The beats are dope, the beats are ill, but we also have to have the consciousness and the messages that go with it as well to complete the picture. That's what so much of our life is about, is finding that balance, the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang, the left and the right brains. And that's what we seek to empower our people with these messages of encouragement, with these messages of inspiration.